Hello friend, welcome back to my channel. In the previous video, we showed how to perform an action on a resource in a RESTful service by way of using the HTTP GET method. So today we're going to see how to use the HTTP POST method, and the purpose of this POST method is to create a new resource or trigger a process. Let's get right into it. As always, we are starting from scratch to show you how easy it is to jumpstart a Jakarta EE project. We always start off by creating a simple Maven project. Now that our project has been created, we always start by creating our application. Let's call it user application. Now the user application is going to be extending the Jakarta EE application. As always, there is no dependency defined in our POM XML, so let's fix that. We always do this because it's so easy and no need for a complex starter project to figure out what actually are needed in terms of packages to be able to create a production ready Jakarta application. First thing I've done is to define the Maven compiler release version that I want to use. Here I want to be using Java version 25. Now that my compiler release version has been set, I need some dependencies. The only dependency I usually need for my robust application is Jakarta EE API version 11, and this is what I'm going to be choosing. Now that my Jakarta 11 has been chosen, next thing we need is to specify how we may want to be building our application. So now let's specify a build. We first create our build element, and we need to tell which plugin Maven should use to compile our application. The first plugin we're going to use is the Maven compiler plugin in version 3.15.0. Now that we have our plugin, we also need the Maven WAR plugin to be able to create an archive. And that's it. This is all we need. Now let's go back to our application. I'm extending from the Jakarta RS application, and I'm specifying in application path I'm going to be using /API to be able to get to my application. Now that the application is ready, I'm going to be creating a new resource. Let's call it user resource. This is the resource endpoint to be able to query all my users. So the resource is going to be delegating the finding of the users to something called a user service, and the user service is just a request scope bin that has an in-memory database, which is a concurrent hash map. We need a user object that we're going to be creating as a record. It has a name and an email. So it has a name and an email, and also along an ID as is identity. Now let's go back to our service. Everything's compiled. Our resource is compiling and our application is ready. Now we can deploy our application. As you can see, I have Glassfish running on my machine. Only thing I need is to add the application to my Glassfish container, and it's going to deploy in an instant. So let's look into the console and see how long it took to deploy. So it took 2 seconds. Usually it takes less than that, but 2 seconds is already very fast. Now let's test our application. I'm calling curl localhost port 8080 slash u slash API slash request response, which is the context path, and then API slash users, and I get all my requests. Now you can start doing some real work. This is from the previous video, so I didn't want to spend some time explaining what's going on. For those interested, just check the video before. The purpose of this video is to show you how to write a post method or to implement a post method in a RESTful web service using Jakarta EE. So I'm using a post method because I want to create a new user. A post method is not idempotent, so it usually changes the state of objects on the server. So that's the reason why we are using a post. So I'm creating a user and I'm delegating the creation of the user to the user service, which has been injected in my user resource. So if we assume that the user has been created, we are going to be returning a response to the caller with a status created, and we may want to be adding to the response the newly created entity, which is the created user. When you've done so, usually when you are creating an object on the server, best practice is always to return the location of the newly created resource. This is what we are doing by adding a header with the location key and the URI to the new resource. There's another way or a better way of doing this, but this is just to illustrate the point. Now we have our user and the response is going to be returned, so we call a build on the response builder. Now we get a valid response. Now let's create the method create user. When the user comes in, first thing we want to check is whether the user has an ID or not. If it doesn't have an ID, so we are going to be creating a new user with a new identity and copy all the parameters or the properties from the incoming request object into the new user, or else we are going to just take the new user as it is and do not change anything because the user is already in the system. Now that we've created our user, we may just go ahead and add it to the database. If the user is new, it's going to create a new record into the database, and if not, it's going to be the same users or as before. Alright, so it needs a new ID to keep things consistent, and we return the created user back to the caller. Now let's test it. As you can see, I don't need to redeploy the application. It's done automatically and it is fast. Now I'm trying to send a post request from the command line by using the curl command with the ---- JSON flag, and I'm posting to my endpoint. So I'm using Microsoft Windows and it has an issue with escaping the JSON in the console. So I'm going to echo the JSON into a file, and I'm going to be posting the file. I have creating, so let's refresh. This is the file with the content, which is the JSON, and I'm going to be posting the file to the endpoint. So user did, see, it's working. So what's happening here is I'm posting a JSON object with the ID 2, right? And the ID is already in the database. That's the reason why it is not creating a new user. But what it is doing is that it's returning the same user. Fine. Now let's add a new attribute. I'm going to be adding a created at attribute, which is a date time. So the creation date of the object. I need to fix all the constructor where I've been initializing the user object. There's the better way of doing this by using a default constructor, but this is going to be the subject of another tutorial. So now I'm fixing all the compiler errors by initializing the created at date time, and as you can see, I get date time back when I'm asking my user. Now let's create a new user. We are going to be removing the ID from our user request object, and as you can see, we are receiving a new ID back, which means that a new user has been created. Now let's run the process again. We receive a new user with an ID 5, which means a new user has been created. So our creation method is working fine. Now let's check the headers. I'm setting up call to return the verbose result, and our location is wrong. A slash is missing between users and the ID of the created user, so let's fix that. I'm adding a slash, and now I'm testing again. As you can see, it's automatically recompiled and redeploy very fast. Now it's fixed, the location is fixed, but the request context, or the context, it's not correct. It should be request response slash API slash user. Now instead of hard coding the context path into my location object, I'm going to be using the context annotation to inject the URI info into my creation method, and I'm in the resource class, which is request scope, and all the metadata will be available in this URI info object. So I'm going to be modifying my location header to be returning the real location of the resource. Usually there should be a URI method that I can use, but we're going to leave it for now. We are going to be setting explicitly the location header. So what I need is to get the path from the URI info with a get path plus slash plus created user. Now let's test it. Ta-da! Exactly, that's what we wanted. The application has restarted. That's the reason why we are getting a new ID 4. So now if I call the post method again, I'm going to be getting number 5, and if I try again, I'll be getting number 6. Exactly, so we have 5 objects there. Now I have a 6th one, and I'm posting again. I'm using verbose, and I get the 7th one. So our create user methods is working fine. Usually best practice is when you do create a new object, you are not going to be returning the object back, but you just return the URI of the newly created object, and this is what we are going to do. So I'm just going to be creating returning the created status plus the URI to the new resource object. Using the URI info context object, I'm getting the path, and I'm adding the created user ID, and I build the response. Let's see the result. Let's fix the formatting first. All right, save, call. You see everything is fine. Oh yeah, a slash is missing between users and the ID. Everything is working fine. As you can see, it's so easy to build a RESTful web service with Jakarta EE. And now here are my key takeaways. Always use Jakarta EE. Use Glassfish or Payara always, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.